I want you to paint a picture. A new Nintendo console just got released. Maybe it was the N64 or the Wii or maybe even the Switch. Whether you were a kid begging your parents to buy it for Christmas or a fully grown adult who had some extra money saved up, we will never forget that magical moment of turning on our console for the first time. A big part of what makes our first experience so magical is the games that come with it, the launch titles. Some of these games might have been bundled with the actual console itself or were just available the day the console came out. But are all the launch titles created equally? Surely they all can't be S-tier 10 out of 10 games, right? Well, today I'll be showing you the best launch titles for every Nintendo console, handhelds included. But what and who determines what game is the best? Is it the game that sold the most copies or is it the highest rated? Maybe it's both. Well, I'll be covering it all so there won't be a question about what game is the best. I'll talk about the launch title that sold the most copies and the launch title that got the highest rating. If the most sold game is also the highest rated, then I'll discuss the second highest rated just to include some variety. Now I know everyone has different interests and opinions, so what might be the highest rated overall might sit lower on your own scale. So to try to be as accurate as possible and remove any potential bias I may have, I looked at the more mainstream credible online game reviewers and compared them to other critics to see if their opinions are similar to everyone else's. I'm not an analytical expert nor an expert on video games, so please go easy on me. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and let's get into it. Now the first ever Nintendo console was the Color TV Game 6. Released on June 1st, 1977, like some consoles back then, this system was the game, so it only had one thing you could play. That game was a clone knockoff of Atari's 1972 Pong. I'm not really sure if this game has an actual name besides Color TV Game 6, but I've heard it referenced before as Light Tennis. Don't quote me on that. As far as ratings go, they are pretty mixed, mostly leaning towards the negative side. But it's the only launch title, so... However, it did manage to sell around 1 million copies, which helped kickstart Nintendo's rise to the home console market. Now we move on to our first handheld, the Game & Watch system. Like the Color TV game system, the console itself was the game, so there was only one launch title. That game was Ball, released in 1980. It's a very simple game and takes very little power to run. Heck, you can load up your browser right now and play this game online for free. You juggle a couple balls in the air and use the buttons to move your hands and catch those balls. That's pretty much it. Obviously today, the game looks like nothing, but back in the day, I can see this being pretty entertaining because even I had a little bit of fun playing it. Though it did get a little boring fast. But this was also huge because it was a very early handheld, so any game would have blew the people's mind back then. Because of this, Nintendo was able to sell over 250,000 units, which was a good start for the Game & Watch systems. But because it was so simple and got old quick, critics called the game a bit uninteresting. Today, because many people recognize how iconic the game is, say the game has a nostalgic charm. Now we're getting into the big hitter consoles, the ones that many of us can recognize today. The first being the NES. This console had a long list of launch titles, but only a couple of them stood out more than the others. Now the Japanese version of the NES, called the Famicom, released before America's NES in 1980, but I'm grouping all the launch titles together to avoid confusion and complicating the video, even if the same console was released at different times in different countries. As you could guess, one of those very popular games was Mario Bros, the game that took Nintendo to the next level. If you haven't heard of this game, I feel sorry for you. This was the highest selling launch title with around 40.24 million copies sold, and for good reason too. I mean, this game is timeless. As you groove to the 8-bit music, jumping on enemies, lighting everything on fire, and avoiding tons of deadly obstacles, you truly start to understand why this game was so popular. Yeah, you could beat the game fairly quick compared to the games we have today, but if you lost all your lives, you weren't sent back to the beginning of the level, you were sent back to the beginning of the game, and there was no way of saving. So kids back then had countless hours spent trying to beat this game, so it didn't matter if it was short. Now, Super Mario Bros. Was also the highest rated launch title, getting a perfect 10 by esteemed critics. So the second highest rated game was Golf, which got around a 9. How Super Mario Bros. Appealed to all ages, this game appealed to an older audience, specifically middle-aged dads. And I mean, there isn't much to explain here, it's golf. You pay attention to the wind, pick the right club, and try to get the ball in the hole. I actually did enjoy playing this because of how simple it is, but I didn't really understand how to play it. Because I don't know much about golf, I didn't know what club to use and I couldn't figure out how to hit the ball far, so I went very over par. But if you can understand how to play, I can definitely see why this game was highly rated. Our next handheld system is the original Game Boy. Not only is the next game we're going to talk about the highest selling launch title on the Game Boy, but it's also the 12th highest selling video game of all time. You may have guessed it, Tetris. This game ruled the 80s and 90s, and even still today, with plenty of remakes and different versions being made. This game sold about 35 million copies on the Game Boy alone, with it also being sold on the NES. Now, I've never been the biggest Tetris fan before, but I think I am now, despite how terrible I am at it. Though the concept of making a straight line with oddly shaped blocks is fairly simple, I underestimated how much brain power and quick reflexes it takes to be good at this game. I was making dumb decisions left and right. But when you fit a block perfectly in a gap and clear a line, it's like the satisfying part of your brain immediately lights up. I got addicted quick and actually forgot that I was recording. I kept telling myself one more try, and then I looked up and saw that an hour had passed by. And the music is iconic. Now, relatively tied for the highest rated launch title for the Game Boy is Super Mario Land, getting about a 9 out of 10. This is definitely one of the stranger Mario games. I thought I played it before, but now I know I haven't. It's similar enough to capture the attention of Mario fans, but offers plenty of different enemies and mechanics to offer something new. Though it may be a bit lower quality, I love the look of each world. The unique boss battles and upbeat music are great. And this game made water levels very enjoyable with this little submarine you use to blast enemies. I was pleasantly surprised when I saw this. Because of how unique this game is, and of course being a 2D Mario platformer, I definitely see why this game is rated so high. Sticking with the Mario theme, the highest selling launch title on the Super Nintendo, or the Super Famicom in Japan, is Super Mario World, released in 1991. I could have told you this without looking it up online. I love this game. I couldn't tell you how many times I beat it. I mean, first of all, the art style is amazing. This game was made in the 90s and still looks good for today's standard. This game opened up a whole new world to what Mario games could be. We got to ride the lovable Yoshi and ultimately sacrifice him, fly effortlessly through half the level with the cape power-up, and squash the unique bosses for each world. We also start to see here how devious these ghost houses can be. I mean, there are so many freaking secrets in this game that I still have to look up online on what they all are to this day. And I actually didn't mind the water levels in this game. They felt smooth, were cute and charming, and actually pretty fun when you're constantly looking for secrets. This game is truly magical. Besides Super Mario World being the highest rated launch title with a rating around 95%, SimCity is up there as well. I was not aware of this game, but I am glad I am now. It's pretty much a build your own city simulator. I was a little skeptical about how good this game could be, especially because it was released on the SNES, but I got hooked right away. It might be a little basic compared to some of the other city simulators we have today, but I honestly prefer it that way. It's just in depth enough to keep me entertained, but not too complicated that I get frustrated because I don't understand. P.S. I'm a bit on the slower side. My city might not look incredible, but I had a lot of fun building houses, facilities, managing taxes, and strategically placing power lines. It's one of those games where you can just sit back and relax and forget the world around you. Next is the black sheep in the Nintendo console family, the Virtual Boy. Now, because the Virtual Boy did so poorly, Nintendo was a bit reluctant to release any information regarding the sales of its games. But thanks to someone on Twitter who works for a global market research center, we know that the highest selling launch title was Red Alarm. Released in 1995, this game was kind of the original Star Fox 64. Do I think this game is bad? Definitely not. Did I have a hard time enjoying it? For sure. I mean, it's fun because it's just a fly and shoot game, so you don't have to think too hard, and the bosses are cool and creative, but everything else is kind of a cluster. The game looks pretty messy. This game is 3D, and because the Virtual Boy's games are essentially just a bunch of red lines, and there are so many elements within this game, I couldn't understand what I was looking at half the time. And there isn't really a setting. Besides the red lines, everything else is just black. Which I guess if you like the ominous feel to it, you can enjoy it more. The boss was pretty cool, but like I mentioned before, I could not tell where I was going or what was hitting me, so I got sent right back to the start. But it's one of Nintendo's earliest 3D games, so I'll cut it some slack. The highest rated launch title, besides Red Alarm with around a 90%, is Galactic Pinball with about a 7 out of 10. I've never been big into pinball, but I can see why it was so popular, especially now because you can play it within the comforts of your own home. There are a bunch of space-themed pinball levels for you to try and get the highest score possible on. It may look less visually appealing than your typical pinball machine, but there are little secrets within each level that activate a special feature and allow you to rack up your score even more. It's a neat game, but it would probably done a lot better if it was released as a mobile game today. Oh yeah, baby, the Nintendo 64. I mean, do I even need to say what the highest selling launch title was? Come on, it's Super Mario 64. Released in 1996 and selling nearly 12 million copies, this game will forever be legendary. And those numbers were just on the actual console itself. Think of how many people purchased it on other consoles through the Virtual Console feature or even emulated it. To this day, many people watch and compete in the speedrunning of this game, and it is so fascinating to see. You can never go wrong with booting this game up. Every level feels so special and unique. I honestly don't think there is one world that isn't memorable. And I don't know how to explain it, but when you played this game as a kid, it was unlike any other gaming experience you had. It felt like stepping into Disneyland for the first time. The music is superb, all the stars and bonus ones were fun to track down, even though they might have been annoying the first time around, and swinging around Bowser by his tail like a kid playing with a dead rat will never get old. I've played this game countless times before, but after talking about it, I think I'm gonna do it again. One of the games I was not expecting to be one of the higher rated launch titles for the N64 was Turok Dinosaur Hunter. Mario 64 obviously takes the lead with around a 96%, but Turok falls behind with a high 85%. This game could not be more different than Mario 64. I don't think I've heard of this game before, but I had so much fun. Implied in the name, you're a dinosaur hunter who needs to make it through each level, surviving and collecting hub ruins. I thought this was going to be a prehistoric game where you hunt down dinosaurs with a bow and arrow, which I was perfectly okay with, but then I pulled out an actual blicky and I thought, hell yeah. Not only can you gun down terrifying dinosaurs, but there are also other people you can send right back to the Stone Age. Well, I guess we're already in the Stone Age, right? The game honestly felt incredibly smooth too, but the controls were really messing up my brain. Not only was looking up and down inverted, the sticks you normally use to look around and move were swapped, so I had a real hard time moving around. But if you can get past that, then this game is such a blast. I wanted to play more, but I had to get through this parkour part of the level, and because I walk around like a penguin on LSD, I could not get past it. But I promise, I will conquer it. Now there's a couple versions of the Game Boy, but the two I'll be talking about is the Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance, starting off with the Game Boy Color. Released in 1998, the highest selling launch title was, get ready for it, Tetris DX. It sold about 2 million copies. This is pretty much the same game that I talked about previously on the original Game Boy with a couple more added features and a visual upgrade. Apart from the standard game mode where you have to see how long you can last, there is an ultra game mode where you have a limited amount of time to get the best score possible. This definitely makes you pick up the pace a bit. There is also a mode called 40 lines where you have to clear 40 lines in order to beat the level. So if you wanted something to kind of grind towards, this is your mode. Lastly, there's a mode where you can test your skills against an AI in a head-to-head battle. Now I'm still cat vomit, but I was starting to get the hang of it, which of course fueled my addiction even more. Again, I had a lot of fun, but now that this game has color, it was even more charming. The highest rated launch title on the Game Boy Color goes to Game & Watch Gallery 2 with around an 8 out of 10. This is the perfect little game to carry around with you and whip out when you're bored for some mindless fun. It's pretty much a compilation of Game & Watch style Mario mini games that are simple and can be a little challenging. The aim of these games are pretty much to get the highest score possible. Of course, I picked the harder difficulty each time. There's Parachute where you have to catch all the Yoshis and Toads, Helmet where you have to make it across the stage while avoiding falling hammers, Chef where you have to toss and catch food and feed it to Yoshi, and Vermin where you have to protect your eggs from enemies. These were all pretty fun, but my favorite had to be the Donkey Kong minigame. It's pretty similar to the OG arcade game, but with a different look to it. Every time you get to the end, the level gets harder with an added obstacle. This game might not offer much in terms of depth, but it would be fun to compete against your friends. The final Game Boy system is the Game Boy Advance. Released in 2001, the highest selling launch title was Super Mario Advance with around 5.5 million copies sold. This is an interesting one because it took the original Mario Bros. And Super Mario Bros. 2 and pretty much remastered it for the handheld system. But hey, I'm definitely not complaining. The two games included within this bundle offer a different experience depending on what mood you're in. If you're looking for a more arcadey, see how long you could last game, then Mario Bros. Would be your choice. But if you're looking for a more story-driven linear game, then Super Mario Bros. 2 would be the best choice. Because the original Mario Bros. Was released in 1983, this version looks 10 times better and gives us that classic Mario look we're used to. The controls felt really nice too. I was speeding through these levels until I wanted something more. Well, with Super Mario Bros. 2, I got that. Because Nintendo was so much bigger now and decided to remaster the game, it felt more like an actual Mario game rather than a reskinned version of a Japanese game. It's still very quirky and strange compared to other Mario games, but I don't know, it just felt right. And now we have actual voice lines and noises that are specific to each character, which is much better than just pure silence. Except I was not expecting Birdo to sound like that.
This is as far as you go.
Now there are two launch titles that are relatively tied for the highest rated, which is Castlevania Circle of the Moon and Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 that range from ratings between 90 and 95%. Castlevania is a 2D RPG platformer where you have to search for your kidnapped mentor while defeating loads of different enemies and bosses. I've played a Castlevania game before for a video, and this one is just as fun. Half the fun is running around slaying everything, and the other half is exploring and unlocking better gear and abilities. But if you're looking for an easy and relaxing game, this is not it. You can tell by the music, this was made to be intense. There are save points scattered across the game, but they are often far apart, so if you die before hitting one, you get sent all the way back to your previous save. And avoiding getting hit altogether by the projectiles and enemy attacks is not easy. And don't even get me started on the boss fights. I spent an unnecessary long amount of time trying to beat these bosses. You really just have to die a couple of times and learn their attack patterns. Though it was hard, it was very fun. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 was a game that I didn't think was possible on the Game Boy Advance. It may look much different compared to the N64 or PlayStation version in terms of visuals and gameplay, but it's equally fun and gets bonus points for being able to take it anywhere. And it actually controlled pretty well too. I think I did better on this game than I did on the normal version. It can be a bit tough estimating where some objects are due to the angle of the camera, but hey, it's a goofy game meant to be just for fun. If you saw my last video where I talked about the final game released for every console, you'd see that I'm pretty terrible at the Tony Hawk games. And in order to unlock new levels, you must complete a number of challenges in the level before, which I couldn't do. But I still really enjoyed it. Now we move on to the glorious cube, the GameCube that is. The highest selling launch title would be Luigi's Mansion with around 3.3 million copies sold. This game honestly makes me wish there was just as much Luigi's Mansion games as there were Mario games. It's a completely different feel to all the other Nintendo games we've played before. Being slower paced and much darker, it perfectly captures that creepy vibe while also maintaining that cartoony Nintendo feel we all love. It also showed that Luigi is perfectly capable of having his own franchise separate from his brother, which I honestly love. If you're not too busy capturing ghosts and raw dogging various inanimate objects, there's a lot to collect and explore in this game. Sure, you could just stay strictly on the main path, but what's the fun in that? And Nintendo did a great job at making sure the game doesn't get stale. There are tons of different ghosts that are super creative and unique and require a good amount of brain power to capture. And the bosses are fire. That was honestly my favorite part of the game. But that annoying crying baby made me never want to have children. Now tied for the highest rated launch title on the GameCube are 3 games all with around a 90% rating, with the first one being Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3. I played this exact game in my last video except on the N64, and wow, does it look so much better on the GameCube. You can tell this game is meant to be on the newer gen consoles. Of course I'm still dog crap, but because the game ran smoother and the controls felt much better, I was actually able to complete enough challenges to unlock the next stage. I was actually starting to get the hang of it a little, which made my experience even better. I enjoyed Canada, but I much prefer Factory. The music is still iconic, the physics are just as goofy and fun, and the challenges are still painful but extremely satisfying to get. You can't go wrong with this game. The second game is Madden 2002. I played Madden 2007 in my last video on the GameCube, and holy smokes, these games feel ages apart. Where in Madden 2007 it was actually a close game, I got completely blown out this game. This game made me depressed. Don't get me wrong, the game is still fun and probably more so against a real player, but the controls felt really awkward. My players could not catch a ball for the life of them, and the opponent felt unguardable. Would I have a better chance not always going for it on 4th down? Sure, but come on, I should have at least been able to score 1 touchdown. The score was 0-31 by halftime. 0-31. Maybe it's just me and not the game. The final GameCube launch title was Star Wars Rogue Squadron 2: Rogue Leader. I actually didn't get to play this game because I couldn't get it to work. But looking online and being a Star Wars fan, I feel I missed out. The game spans out across all 3 original trilogy movies where you play as Rebellion pilots, Luke Skywalker and Wedge Antilles. You complete various missions destroying the Empire. Honestly, the game looks really good. The voice lines and special cutscenes make this game look even better. It's definitely more of an arcade shooter, but there is still a lot to grind for, like using points to unlock bonus levels. And if you want a more realistic pilot experience, you can go into the cockpit view, which looks awesome. Seeing all the different things you can do in this game makes me even more bummed out that I couldn't play it. Now we have one of the strangest Nintendo consoles on this list, the Pokémon Mini handhelds. And when they say mini, they mean mini. I think my left testicle may be bigger than these things. Because it was so tiny, there was only one game available for each console, similar to the Game & Watch systems. And similar to the Virtual Boy, I couldn't find any information regarding the sales of each game, and on top of that, the reviews were very mixed. So to make sure I don't piss anyone off, I'll talk about all 4 of the launch titles, which will be very quick because of how simple they are. Released in 2001, these games were pretty much little party games you would whip out for like 30 minutes of fun. It was in no way intended to be like any of the other Pokemon games that have a long stretched adventure. Pokemon Party Mini is essentially a Pokemon Mario Party except without the board and a lot less depth in the actual minigames. There's 8 minigames included, but 2 of them can only be played with 1 player, which obviously I couldn't do. Most of the minigames require just a simple button press and can be beaten under 10 seconds, but all of them have records which motivates you to keep playing and beat. It's a fun little gimmick game, but I don't think I'll be playing it again. Pokemon Pinball Mini is, well, Pokemon Pinball. You're a Diglett who has to hit the ball in each hole. That's pretty much it. The physics work well and it can be entertaining for a little bit, but only for a little bit. However, there is a quest mode where you have to beat each level to unlock the next. But when I beat the first level, I would get a time's up message and the next level wouldn't unlock, so I guess screw me then. Pokemon Puzzle Collection is a collection of puzzles that will for sure test your puzzle abilities. This is probably the most content-packed Pokemon minigame of the launch titles because of how many different levels there are for each type of puzzle. There are 3 different puzzles. One requires you to rearrange the tiles and make the Pokemon. This one was probably my favorite until I tried this very fast moving one. I think it's a Dodrio, but how the hell am I supposed to know what I'm looking at? The second puzzle requires you to fit smaller shapes into a larger shape, which I could not do because I was clearly dropped on my head as a child. And the final puzzle, I think you have to make Pikachu a path to the hole, but again, me stupid. The final Pokemon Mini launch title is Pokemon Zany Cards, with a collection of 4 different Pokemon card games, except one of them you can only play with another player. They're alright, but it would definitely be more fun against someone else. The best had to be Special 7. You pretty much have to play a card the same number or suit as the card in the middle of the board. Depending on what card you play, some have special animations with different Pokemon that has some sort of effect on your opponents. It was pretty cool to see. Now we move on to the infamous DS. There's no surprise that the remake/redesign of the great and almighty Super Mario 64 would be the best-selling launch title on the DS. Super Mario 64 DS was released in 2004 and sold around 11 million copies, which sounds really impressive until you realize it's only 10th on the list of most sold DS games of all time. Though the 2 games may share the same name, they are very different from each other. Sure, I would have been happy if they just simply ported Mario 64 to the DS because the original was that good, but Nintendo went 10 steps beyond that, and it is still one of my favorite games of all time. The amount of stuff they added in this game is absolutely bonkers. You can play as Yoshi, Luigi, Mario, and Wario. Wario, people, this chunky, devious character is actually in the game. Apart from each character having different mechanics and power-ups, there are extra levels and stars, which makes this game longer than the original. The original had 120 stars, while the DS version had 150. If you're not in the story mood, then you can always play the mini-games that you can unlock by hunting down rabbits around the castle. And these games could be released on their own because they are that fun. Yeah, some of them aren't as good as others, but a lot of them are amazing. The only thing that sucks is that this game can only be played on the DS. I would love nothing more if Nintendo remastered this for their newer consoles, or at least bring it in as a virtual console game. Tied with Mario 64 DS as the highest rated launch title is Metroid Prime Hunters at around an 85% rating. I've only really played one other Metroid game, which was on the SNES, but this one is just as fun, if not more. Though it was tough for me to get the controls down, I had a blast running through the game, gunning down enemies out of the sky. And there's a lot more to this game than just that. You have to solve puzzles, parkour up obstacles, and explore eerie hallways and rooms. It kinda gives me a bit of Alien vibes, which I really liked. And the Morph Ball was super fun. It almost felt like a separate minigame when I was cruising around in this form. Once I got far enough, I got to this quick, disgusting half-bug, half-lizard boss, which was hard to pin down. But once I beat him, my confidence in this game rose. Now we move on to one of Nintendo's most famous consoles, the Wii. I mean, come on, we all know the best-selling launch title, right? Wii Sports, with about 83 million copies sold? No other game even comes close. It's literally the third best-selling video game of all time. Released in 2006, this game, to this day, is a certified masterpiece. I feel like everyone and their grandma's grandma has played this at least once, and for good reason too, because this game perfectly appeals to all ages. I mean, if you ever wanted to challenge my video game skills, screw a quick scoping match on Rust or a 1v1 on Fortnite or any other game, you better pick up that Wii remote and get ready to bring it. Sure, you might have your favorite sport, but there is not one bad sport in this game. They are all S tier in their own ways. If you wanted a perfectly paced game, you load up tennis. If you wanted a super competitive game that requires more technique, you'd play baseball. If you wanted something that was still pretty competitive but slower paced, you'd play bowling or tennis. And if you wanted an intense, battle of the fittest game, then boxing would be your go-to. They have something for everyone. If you had a little group together with a couple of your friends, this is the perfect game to boot up. But if you wanted to play the game by your lonesome, there's a bunch of practice activities which are essentially just mini-games. Or you could just face the bot, but just look out for Matt. The highest rated launch title for the Wii goes to The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess at about a 9.5 rating. If you loved Ocarina of Time, which most people do, then this game is perfect for you because they are very similar, as in structure-wise, and there are a lot of the same places you visit. Now, I've played and beaten the game before, but all my save data is gone, so you're just gonna have to take my word for it because I would have to put in a lot of hours to get the footage I'd want and need. Because this game is on the Wii, Nintendo took full advantage of it with the ability to swing the Wii remote, which will swing Link's sword, which is pretty cool and immersive. So if you have the option to play the HD version on the Wii U or the original on the Wii, I'd pick the Wii. And the story is amazing. I won't give away any spoilers, but it's a pretty dark story with some awesome cinematics. Every Zelda game has some gimmick or special feature that revolves around the game. In this game, you can play as an actual wolf. So if any of you watching are furries, well, there you go. Of course, you could stick to the story and solve various mind-boggling puzzles, but one of the best features of a Zelda game is exploring. And there's a lot of that to do here because this map is humongous. I will definitely be playing this game again. Now we have the 3DS with its highest selling launch title being Nintendogs Plus Cats, selling almost 5 million copies. Now I didn't make it far at all in this game because a huge feature is using the microphone to call your pet, and because I'm not exactly playing on an actual 3DS, cough cough, there was no way for me to stimulate that microphone and move forward, at least from what I could see. Apparently, if you enjoyed Nintendogs, then this game might appeal to you because it's almost identical to the previous game except now with cats. There is no story, however there's no need for one because the main point of this game is to just take care of and have fun with adorable little pets. You can take care of them by feeding them, playing with them, bathing them, or taking them out on walks. But that's not all. You can also compete in competitions which are pretty much just minigames. You earn money from these competitions which you can then spend on little outfits and accessories for your pets. I mean, come on, how can you dislike a puppy and a cute little hat? Not being able to play this game is not a deal breaker, but I am a little disappointed. Now the highest rated 3DS launch title is Super Street Fighter 4 3D Edition, getting around an 85 out of 100. I'm sure this game is good, but after making this video, I'm now realizing that many of the 3DS launch titles were mid as hell. Moving on, I didn't get to play this game either. It ran like total crap on my computer, and because the eShop is closed, my only other option was to buy the game online and wait for it to arrive. 1, I ain't got time for that, and 2, your boy is broke. I'm actually really disappointed this time because I've never actually played a Street Fighter game and was really looking forward to trying one. Nonetheless, it looks pretty freaking good being on a handheld system. And though this is pretty much a port from Street Fighter IV on consoles, they did not skimp out. Yeah, it doesn't look as appealing, but you can play all 35 characters in all stages. Not only that, but they also added little figurines you can collect, so if you're a big fan of Street Fighter IV, then something new on the 3DS version should excite you. Of course, the fighting looks good and probably feels as good as ever, but now you can take it with you when you get your prostate exam. As we approach towards the end, we get to my favorite console of all time, the Wii U. The highest selling launch title is New Super Mario Bros. U with almost 6 million copies sold. Released in 2012, this game pretty much follows the exact same formula as the previous New Super Mario Bros. Games. But at this point in time, I don't think anyone was sick of that formula. These 2D Mario platformers were so good, even if it wasn't too different from the previous ones. But there were plenty of new things to look forward to, which made this game even better. There's a flying squirrel power-up that's kinda similar to the cape from Super Mario World, but not nearly as OP and can cling you to walls. Also, we saw the lovable Nabbit introduced for the first time, which was really refreshing having a new character be part of the game, even if he was an antagonist. There are now cute little baby Yoshis in the game you carry around and offer special abilities. A really underrated feature for this game is boost mode on the gamepad. If you're like me and have younger siblings who really want to play with you but are just too terrible, you can give them the gamepad and they can make blocks to help you out through the game, or do a little bit of trolling. Even though this game is nothing too new, it will never not be fun because it perfectly captures the old feel and new feel of what a Mario game is. Now for the highest rated Wii U launch title, we have a 3-way tie, all getting around an 85 out of 100 rating. Now, none of these games are actually Wii U or Nintendo exclusives, but are such amazing games that they got great ratings on every console. The first is Batman Arkham City. My first time ever playing this game was on the Wii U, funny enough, but I remember it more on Xbox. And oh my god, this game is still so good. The fighting mechanics are super fun and honestly never gets tiring. The story is probably one of the best plots in video game history, but I'm a little biased because I'm a Batman superfan. And the exploration for side missions and collectibles are really rewarding. Now I know not everyone can afford multiple consoles at one time, but if you had or have the opportunity to play this game on Xbox or PlayStation, I would do so. The game is still great on the Wii U, but I encountered a good amount of frame drops a lot during the game, especially when flying through the open world, which is a little annoying. But there are a couple of features and gimmicks that are exclusive to the Wii U version. Firstly, when someone else besides Batman is speaking through the Batsuit's radio communicator, instead of playing the audio through the TV, it'll play through the gamepad. This feels much more immersive. I was honestly confused at first because my gamepad's volume was down, so for a little bit I just heard Batman talking to himself. Also, you can manage your gadgets and the map on the gamepad instead of having to pause. Lastly, there are abilities like the detective mode and scanning for conversation that uses the gamepad's touchscreen and gyro controls to complete. These features are really neat, but I still prefer it on the other consoles. The second game is Darksiders 2. I think I may have heard the title of this game before, but that's about it. I had no idea what I was jumping into, but I loved it. In this game, you play as Death, who seeks to prove his brother War's innocence for starting an apocalypse on Earth. You go on a gruesome and magical journey, slaying monsters and bosses, collecting gear and weapons, and riding a sick-ass dead horse named Despair. I will 100% be playing the Darksiders games now because this was awesome. The combat is so badass. You can use your scythes to slash up enemies and your secondary weapons to deal massive damage. And if you wanted to execute your opponent, you can do that too. The parkour element is a big part of this game and it feels really smooth and quick. I honestly kinda hate games where moving across a ledge takes forever. And don't even get me started on the bosses. They are so incredibly unique and cool, I was finna bust. As far as being on the Wii U, like I said, I've never played this game before on any other console, but I honestly didn't encounter any issues with this version. Yeah, this game probably looks better on the other consoles, but I don't mind. The last game is Assassin's Creed 3. As many of you may know, this is a very story-driven game. I never gotten too big into the Assassin's Creed games, mainly because the amount of collectibles are overwhelming, which I know sounds weird, but it was super nice just focusing on the story and doing sick-ass assassin stuff. The game felt really smooth being on the Wii U. Mechanics like fighting and parkour all worked like they were supposed to. I know this game is really big on the climbing mechanics, but I was still really shocked about the sheer amount of things you can actually climb in this game. This game really gives you the freedom to take any path and approach you'd like. Because this game is very story driven, I barely scratched the surface of what this game had to offer. I mean, I think I played an hour into the game and then got to the intro screen. This game has a lot. Now we've reached our final console, the Nintendo Switch. Now the best-selling Nintendo Switch launch title shouldn't surprise you, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, with around 32 million copies sold. This game took what we thought Zelda games could be and blew our expectations out of the water. Nintendo wanted to deliver a game they know we'd all love, but also exhibit what the Switch is capable of. And that's exactly what they did. This game is perfect. Sure, you can follow the storyline and beat the game relatively quick, but like I mentioned before, one of the best elements of Zelda games is the exploration, and there is more of that here than ever before. You can gallop across miles and miles of land on your trusty steed, uncover tons of shrines that offer unique and challenging puzzles for you to solve, or you could just find and discover cool cozy spots that truly offer you inner peace. If you're looking for a peaceful and action-packed game, this game is perfect for you. There are so many things in this game that make it perfect, like the fighting mechanics, the boss fights, the crafting and cooking, the collectibles, the countless gear you can collect, the side missions, and so much more. Though there are so many on the internet, I could make a whole video the length of this one just on this game alone. The gimmick of this Zelda game is the ancient abilities you can use. These really make solving puzzles and fighting enemies really fun. Easily a 10 out of 10 game. Apart from Breath of the Wild obviously being the highest rated launch title, the second highest rated is a two-way tie between Shovel Knight Treasure Trove and World of Goo, getting around a 90% rating. Starting off with Shovel Knight, this game kind of made me had an existential crisis. Not because the game was bad or anything, in fact, the game was amazing, but it really made me evaluate why I only play the games I do. This game showed me that I really need to explore and try different genres of games that I may like this one. I loved this game, even though I haven't even come close to beating it. Besides having a really cool and interesting story, this 2D platformer excels at being different from other 2D platformers. First of all, your weapon of choice is a frickin' shovel. So not only can you bash up enemies and propel yourself into the air with this shovel, you can also use it to dig up bunches of loot. Speaking of loot, it's a huge part of this game, and this game makes it super fun and non-boring picking up all the treasure. The sense of exploration and different types of enemies absolutely makes this game, especially the bosses. I'm always super excited about which boss I'm about to fight next. And this game isn't your typical 2D platformer where you beat a level and move on to the next. You can stop at towns along the way where you can chat with the locals, spend your loot on better gear and abilities, and so much more. This game honestly brings a tear to my eye. The last and final game we'll be talking about is World of Goo. This game was actually released all the way back in 2008, which is really weird why this game would be a launch title for a system released in 2017. Nonetheless, the game is still fun even if it could have almost been a launch title for the Wii. I couldn't actually get this game to work on the Switch, but I was able to play it on my computer through the Google Play Store, which weirdly enough, I needed a Netflix subscription for. But I think this is way better because I can use an actual mouse. I said in my last video that I'm not the biggest fan of puzzle games, but after playing all these different types of games, especially this one, I realized I do like some. This is a very creative and fun one. It's pretty much a bridge constructor game, except a lot more goofy and with these balls of goo. You have to build your goo contraption to the pipe so that a certain amount of goo balls can escape. The kicker is that each level implements a different obstacle or requires you to perform a different task not previously faced before. And these levels will absolutely test your puzzle solving abilities. There were a couple of stages where I spent way more time on them than I should have. And honestly, I would say the best part of this game is the physics. It performs exactly as you would expect it to behave, which is essential for solving these puzzles. This game is great, but I don't really understand the plot. All I know is goo. And there you have it, the best launch titles for every Nintendo console. I tried to cover as much as I could and be super unbiased. But let's be honest, not a single person watching this will 100% agree with this list. We all have personal experiences and memories associated with certain games that will always be cherished in our hearts as a 10 out of 10 game. What this list does though is provide you with what the general opinions were about each launch title was. The so-called Switch 2 is being talked about more and more recently. Throughout the entire span of all the Nintendo consoles, they have a rough history of releasing a banger console that performs well and then followed by a console that doesn't do well. Hopefully with the Switch 2, Nintendo is able to break the curse and release some launch titles that are just as memorable as most of the games on this list. This video took a lot of work, so a simple like and subscribe would be very appreciated. I hope you guys enjoyed and I'll catch you guys later. Deuces.